Now, here's the thing. I don't usually say this to a guest, but if people are watching this right now, it's because they found us online on YouTube. I did an act of the show that's on tonight explaining why. It's not the first time you've caused some drama. FCC opening probe into The View after appearance by Tallarico. Do you mean to cause trouble?
I think that Donald Trump is worried that we're about to flip Texas.
According to what was later disclosed, CBS lawyers requested that the interview be canceled out of concern over a possible investigation by the Federal Communications Commission. Not only that, Colbert was also instructed not to say on air that the interview had been blocked. In other words, not only was the content stopped, but the very act of stopping it had to remain silent. The question is, what would cause a major media corporation like CBS to pull back at the last minute? What would make them so afraid that they would effectively silence themselves? The reason cited revolved around an old Federal Communications Commission regulation, the equal time rule. This rule requires that if a broadcast station invites one candidate for office on air, it must provide an equivalent opportunity to that candidate's opponent. In theory, it is a rule of balance. In practice, for decades, political talk shows and entertainment programs have enjoyed exemptions. Colbert could invite a Democratic candidate without immediately having to invite the opposing Republican Party candidate. That practice has been accepted across multiple administrations. However, recently the FCC chair signaled the possibility of revisiting that exemption, arguing that many talk shows are partisan in motivation, especially when their content is unfavorable to the party in power. To understand the sensitivity of the moment, one has to look at the broader context. Texas has long been a stronghold of the Republican Party, a reliably red state, yet the gap between the two parties in some polls has narrowed. A competitive Senate race in Texas, if it materializes, could directly affect the balance of power in Washington and influence the administration of Donald Trump. James Tallarico is not an unknown figure. He represents a younger generation of Democratic politicians who speak frequently about faith, social justice, and community responsibility. In the planned interview, he intended to discuss how Texas could flip if voters changed their choices. He also intended to criticize how the current administration handles the media and uses federal regulatory agencies. And that is precisely the most sensitive point, an interview that could directly question how the Trump administration pressures the media ecosystem. The current chair of the FCC is Brendan Carr. Under his leadership, the FCC has signaled a tougher stance toward national television networks. Investigations have been opened, legal warnings have been sent, and the equal time rule, requiring balanced airtime opportunities for candidates, has been reiterated as a tool that could be activated at any moment. CBS is a business, but businesses understand the power environment they operate in. When regulators signal they are prepared to review, fine, or even threaten broadcast licenses, legal departments do not wait for a direct order from the White House. It only takes an atmosphere that is clear enough. But the story does not end there. The Ellison family, influential in ownership structures connected to Warner Brothers and the broader related media ecosystem, has been accused by some observers of having deeper economic motivations. Critics argue that major media mergers, acquisitions, or restructurings require approval or at least the absence of obstruction from federal regulators. And when the Trump administration controls those agencies, avoiding political conflict is no longer merely an ethical choice. It becomes a survival strategy. Some critics even warn that if this trend continues, networks once considered central pillars of mainstream information flow may gradually adjust their content to avoid risk, not because they are openly forced, but because they choose the path of least conflict. And that may be the most concerning feature under Trump. Control does not need to be overt. It operates through fear. Fear of losing licenses, losing deals, losing access. But the story is not entirely one-sided. The internet has disrupted the traditional model of control. When CBS did not air the interview, the segment was uploaded to YouTube. Clips spread to Instagram, TikTok, and X. The cumulative views far exceeded linear television ratings. This is the modern version of the Streisand effect. The more you try to suppress something, the more you amplify it. That creates a paradox. If the goal is to prevent a message from spreading, the tactic may backfire. But if the goal is to send a warning signal to the entire media industry, then a single high-profile incident may be enough for other legal departments to sit down and ask themselves, is this risk worth taking? And that may be the real objective. So let us return to the core question. If this truly represents a chilling effect, applying enough pressure that businesses self-censor, what are the long-term consequences? First, national television could become less sharp-edged, not because hosts lack courage, but because legal teams stand behind them. The boundaries are shaped by concern over clashing with the Trump administration. Second, the space for debate may shift toward less regulated platforms. In that environment, the line between journalism, commentary, and propaganda becomes more blurred. Ironically, that dynamic can create fertile ground for more extreme messages to spread, a paradoxical outcome of excessive tightening. Third, voters are left to navigate a fragmented information ecosystem without a shared center. Trust in traditional journalism declines, while the administration gains additional grounds to attack it as biased. And in an election year, that matters. Texas, that once considered a Republican fortress, is increasingly described as a battleground. The mere possibility of flipping Texas is enough to generate intense political tension. In that context, every interview, every viral clip, every faith-based political message carries weight. James Tallarico speaks about Matthew 25. He argues that faith should be measured by how people treat others, not by which party they vote for. In a state with a strong evangelical tradition, that message directly challenges the long-standing religious political coalition that Trump has relied upon to consolidate power. And that may be why this interview is no longer just late-night entertainment. It becomes a test whether American media still has enough freedom to question power, or whether it will choose silence before being forced into it.